This is Vicki Joe, and I'm here with Dario and I. And Dario has been doing some fascinating research in the realm of neuroscience and personality.
Mm-hmm.
And we've done a series of these to kind of get some of the really lovely, detailed information about it. So today, I want to move toward a difficult topic. This comes up so much in coaching, and I see it come up around conversations about personality, and that is neuroscience, which is studying the brain, right? The way that you define it, and emotions. So what is the relationship between emotions and the brain?
Well, that's a great question. And the funny thing is that for the first 5 years or so of my research, I didn't really bother to look at that question.
We'll just skip that one.
Not important. Maybe it's the realm of something, because the only emotions are clinical emotions, right? Yeah, so we have to deal with something. Yeah. And then I was introduced to some work. Some folks said, hey, could you do a little bit of research for us connecting emotions and psychological defenses with the brain activity? And I said, sure. It was a great opportunity. And it really forced me to go back and read through all of the notes that I had kept, to sort of like lab journal notes for all of the subjects, as well as reading the literature with an eye towards what is going on emotionally in the brain. And that, I mean, it really has been an eye-opener. And in my book at the time, I had like 2 pages out of 200, 1% that was about emotions. And now...
Not on your radar.
Not on my radar. And now I'm happy to say, like, I do a whole webinar on the topic, and I believe actually there really could be 2. So it's a very, very rich topic and very important.
Well, so why do we experience emotions? Have you gotten toward that?
Yeah, absolutely. So well, first of all, where do emotions come from in the brain? And they also come from the body. So that we have hormones, we have the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight response, the faint or flurry response. And they're also in the limbic system, which usually when you read stuff about the brain, they're going to talk about like hatred and anger and phobias and fear and joy and bonds between parents and children and so on. And that's all good stuff. As I moved to the neocortex and using EEG to look at what's going on there, we actually discovered the neocortex is also an emotional part of the brain.
Interesting.
And that I would say easily half the regions have clearly identifiable contribution to emotional life. Maybe not those super visceral, like I'm going to rip your throat out kinds of emotions. More like I'm using my imagination to think about how I'm going to rip your throat out. Or gently caress you, or whatever it is that is going through our minds. So a whole variety of emotions. And we've seen this in the existing literature about happiness and sadness, but there's so much more.
Interesting. And so would you say the emotions help us or hinder us, or what kind of...
Well, I'll give some examples of how emotions work in the neocortex, and we'll go from there.
Great.
So one example is this region over here. This, if you're right-handed. So this is called the T3 region in the EEG terms. And it's responsible for, or helps us with, hearing melody, remembering melodies, keeping...
Wait, I noticed you cupped your ear.
Yeah.
So
to give a little...
like right there.
Right there, behind the ear. Yeah, not like behind this way, like underneath. And that is also, it helps us hear tone of voice and the intentions that are carried by tone of voice. And one of the cool things is they found... Not me personally, I've only seen it twice by accident, but experiments that are set up to deal with people who have anger management issues or things like that they find that those folks have an inordinate amount of activity of a particular kind in this region here. So what can happen is, if we want to understand what's going on with emotions, we want to know what part of the brain is involved and what else is it doing besides bringing about those emotions. So imagine we're talking and I lie to you about something important. You may detect that in my tone of voice. When you detect that in the tone of voice, that's the same region that is apparently involved in managing hostility, so that you may have feelings of anger or irritation because you are detecting something in the tone of voice, and that's a very fast response. Moreover, as we look to see what regions are around that, so we move a little bit forward up to here, like this right temple area. It's been associated with religious belief, personal identity, also some things around eidetic memory. So what are some other reasons why we might get angry? Well, we might get angry because somebody has violated our personal beliefs. Mm-hmm. That they have trampled on when I say my music or my whatever it is, my child, then we immediately, there's a threat, and we might have a defensive, we're going to use our anger to push the person away or to take a stance, like animals do in a sense, but in a little bit more sophisticated way. Moreover, this region here has a little what's called a neural bridge that connects this region to some others over here, temporal to the parietal lobe. It's the right, temporal parietal bridge. Sort of cool, by the way. You can take a little device and stimulate that region of the brain to sort of jiggle it and turn it off. That region is involved in bringing to bear ethics when evaluating other people's actions and our own actions.
Wow.
Right near there as well, as we move back behind the ear, is a part that's involved with thinking ahead to different timelines and evaluating those. So when English speakers say the word will, like what will happen, frequently that region will become active as we consider different timelines. Well, ethics and time are often involved because you could have done such and such, or if you were to do the right thing, you will do such and such. And so personal violations of ethics, of values, coming off as phony, interfering with our personal space as we move over this way. There's some stuff about body movement, personal space. These are all reasons that we can get mad very easily because these regions all neighbor each other. And what's the point of getting mad? It has an evolutionary purpose. It's either to defend our values, it's to defend our personal space, it's to admonish someone for a potential or actual ethics violation, to take a stand. And we even think, when is it appropriate to be angry? Righteous anger. When a person has done something that is evaluated as ethically or morally wrong. The morals part being more the personal, like the deep belief stuff.
And what you're making me realize is the link between all of that and politics, right? And it's just coming right up, right? That,
yes,
that politician didn't keep their promise, now I'm angry, or this doesn't match what's in the Constitution, I'm angry. So I see right there the relationship between the values, the stance, and the emotion.
That's probably why politicizing everything as a goal probably not a good idea, because then that taps into our personal beliefs, and then immediately we're just going to be angry all the time.
We'll shut down.
Yes,
exactly.
yeah. No, there are other reasons why we may become angry as well, but that's an example where perception, hearing the tone of voice, for example, or we detected there's an ethics violation, there's a perceptual element there. The behavior of getting angry, the feeling of irritation or hostility. It's not an actual punch, it's actually irritation that's there. The thoughts that go with this, how dare you do that, or what you're saying is just wrong, or you're in my personal space. And so we understand that emotions are not like this separate part of the brain, but are interwoven with perception, behavior, and thinking. And then we have this genius thing where that's just one instrument, and all the other instruments are playing together. Wow. So we can have all these conflicting emotions.
I've had that.
Yeah.
I know what you mean.
In fact, that has a feeling too.
Yes, it does.
The I know what
right
you
there.
mean has a feeling too. And that actually was a really fun thing to realize, that there are many things that we don't quite label as emotions, which they have an emotion.
Cool.
So the feeling of being precise. Oh, you know what? So I'm accused when I'm working on some kind of project, and I sit next to the person who does the book covers, my book covers, and I'm like, could you move everything over by 1 pixel? Like that feeling of just wanting it exact. Okay, there's a part of the brain over in here.
I know that
There
feeling.
is.
Yes.
You know that feeling.
Yes.
And so those are the kinds of things. It's not like this necessarily all this visceral stuff.
Well, I did it with people, I just want to straighten your collar, just this little bit, and
That's
it's
right.
silly.
Well,
It's this little petty thing. Yeah, there we go. I say, no, Now I can
Yeah,
relax.
that's right. And if I use the right accent as well, then all of a sudden you're going to think I'm much smarter than I really am. I mean, that's right, isn't it? So we've got all these biases.
I read that a British person with like a third grade education is considered more intelligent than someone from Arkansas with a PhD.
Unfortunately, that's where actually that next piece comes in is, while some of these seems like they're the result of evolution, that particular brain regions help us in certain ways, that we also have these behavioral patterns, as we talked about last time, these neural circuits, and even the time before, these holistic patterns, where we make associations between things that are cultural in nature, that are personal backgrounds, and then very much like the things that we value as our identity, or other things' identity, the way we categorize things, that those are all in the brain too. And so we can have we hear somebody with a particular accent, and we might have anger to them right away because we make all these assumptions and stereotypes just from that one piece of information. And that's how the brain regions can react really quickly. And maybe that served us very well sometimes. Clearly it does, because we all do that. But then it's also our task to bring to bear the two executive regions of the brain, which, bless them, they need to handle the limbic system, the cerebellum, the rest of the neocortex, and the big thing they need to do, especially in our teens and 20s, is learn how to manage all those emotions.
Well, and you just brought in a term that I've been curious about, which is the limbic system.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
Connect me with the limbic system in the face of this.
So some of what we see, like these emotional reactions, can be that what goes on in the limbic system percolates upwards or connects to, say, like the temporal lobes. Other times it really is at the prefrontal regions there that their job is to manage everything that's going on all across it. We essentially all have two CEOs. We have Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. Or whatever.
Those guys.
And how many companies, by the way, especially these well-known tech companies today, have two founders? And so we see actually a lot of this.
Right.
So the brain has this too, a cruel joke. We have two CEOs, but one is a little bit more dominant than the other one, and at least for a lot of the time. And their job is to manage everything that happens in the brain, including all that emotional stuff. And especially because the limbic system, which I've described previously, is sort of like this cat-dog part of our brain that has these very strong responses. Yes. Yeah. So there's also, it's not just these different regions contributing emotional responses, which, by the way, that it wants to help us. If a person is worried has to do with this region back here. I'm looking into the future and I see something bad will likely happen. So the worry is there is a signal playing, please do something. Our executive regions need to figure out what do those signals mean and what do we do with them in order to make ourselves happy, satisfied, coordinated with our environment.
Well, and now you're leading me to, this is such a popular thing in coaching, is emotional intelligence. So is that what you're talking about? Is that what we're aiming for? Those two CEOs are making us emotionally intelligent or not?
I would say, like, I personally don't use the word or term emotional intelligence because I think, like, there's some really good. It is. It's very popular, and I think it comes from a very well-meant place. The emotions are as important as like the brainy, logical aspects.
Right.
Especially the practical things, relationships, getting ahead, or whatever it is. But beyond that, I refer to it as emotional dynamics because when we have these neural circuits that respond a certain way habitually, that means we're responding emotionally a certain way. So that forms like a particular dynamic, but then we can shift sometimes. I mean, surely you've noticed there are times when everything is great and you're going along and then all of a sudden on a dime, you could be upset or enraged or frightened or whatever it is. We can respond so quickly.
The date that goes to hell. Yeah.
Right, and sometimes it may sneak up on you, but sometimes like it's sort of like the water is slowly rising and it goes over the dam. But other times it's a very sharp shift. And a great example would be this region here, sort of the left executive region. It has a really great filter. So it helps us focus. And by the way, it pushes out the extraneous stuff that doesn't fit. And you know what? Criticism and failure are kinds of distractions. And so that region is very much associated with happy feelings, because it shoves out the stuff that's the failures and whatnot. And you just keep going forward, just maintain your composure. But I view it as like a dam. Like at some point, the amount of criticism, the number of failures, just the energy needed in the neurons to keep that region going. Like the water goes over the dam and the person shifts to a different dynamic, a different way of responding. And I say easily you could have somebody who's very happy and composed and confident 95% of the time, 4% of the time is enraged, and 1% of the time is sobbing.
Interesting.
Or you could have somebody 1/3 of the time is perpetually embarrassed and sensitive to social interactions, and 1/3 of the time, I don't want to say morose, but like introspective and sort of like melancholic. And then another third, like a complete variety.
So the obvious question is what, if anything, can we do to improve our emotional dynamism?
Yeah. No, I mean, that's because more than being smart, I think people want to be happy. And, it's the American dream, right? Yes. Yeah.
Life, liberty, and the pursuit of.
That's where the pursuit of happiness. So I think a lot of it has to do with the literature on habit forming and remaking habits, making new habits. Sort of pushing old habits to the side. And that's not something I do because I'm not a clinician, but I can report on what that literature is. And by the way, that's why I have this tennis ball the whole time. Is because if emotions, perception, behavior, and thoughts are all interwoven with each other, that means that if we want to form new emotional responses and habits, we need to be physical.
Interesting.
We need to think different thoughts. We need to focus our perception in different places. So if you want to be, it's not just about putting on a smile or saying nice little, things to yourself, a mantra by itself. It really is about getting the whole body involved, focusing on different things even. And I think parents know with little kids, the magic of managing little kids is to shift their attention to something else. Yes, that's right. And if you can engage them in a physical activity that reinforces that, you're engaging the whole brain, not just the neocortex or some parts of it. And so it's about that habit, anywhere from 3 weeks to 3 months, that if you can consistently find a way to shift the behavior, the perception, the emotions, and the thoughts, or 2 or 3 of those legs of that chair, you're going to go a long way to finding within yourself the space to have healthier, more satisfying responses.
I love what you're saying because I notice that shows up in my coaching. Exactly that, shifting our perspective and bringing in the physical body and all of that. So what's cool is that you are bringing in the neuroscience research to back up the stuff that coaches have been doing for years, just innately. So, yay, I love that. Great.
Excellent.
So thanks so much, Dario, for another really fascinating look at neuroscience and personality and emotional intelligence, or what did you say, emotional flexibility?
Absolutely. Emotional dynamics, but you've hit it. It is about flexibility.
Yeah,
yes.
Great. Love that. So thanks so much, and let's do this again real soon.
Absolutely. See you again. Thank you.